WREN is the Wadebridge Renewable Energy Network, which is our response to what is really a rather odd situation. Here in Cornwall, we're surrounded by more than enough energy from wind, tide, sun, wave, biomass and geothermal sources, so we should be rich in energy terms. But instead, our town of less than 10,000 people is shelling out over £10 million per year that we can't really afford. There are not enough good jobs, so many of our young people have to leave. Many people in our area are in fuel poverty, which in simple terms means that they have to choose between being rather cold or rather hungry. Many people are worried about climate change, which is slightly less theoretical an issue if your town is threatened by rising sea levels. We wouldn't accept this sort of muddle in respect of other essential things, drinking water for example. If you had a spring running by your kitchen door, would you import your water from abroad? Hardly. So why treat energy differently? We're also at the end of the line, so our lights would go out first. And who should we trust to help us keep them on? Given the choice, should we depend on President Putin, for example, for our energy? Or might we prefer to rely on a local farmer, Andrew Hawkey, for example, whose family has farmed here for centuries? Or perhaps we'd be better off owning our own energy sources collectively. So how and when did we all get into this muddle, when as a species we've evolved over countless millennia to be masters of energy management? The simple answer is that we became temporarily de-skilled a little while back, and we can readily re-skill ourselves. There was an illusion some decades ago that energy was cheap. We now know that it only seemed cheap because the true costs of fossil fuels were pushed onto the future in terms of changing the climate. The original thermostat was a great thing, but it allowed people to become passive recipients of forms of energy which many now cannot afford and which carry unacceptable risks. But things can change very fast. Think what happened to communications. We were also evolved to talk, sing, tell stories and perform. There was a period in the mid to later 20th century when everything went black and white and people briefly accepted communication as a one-way projection from the centre. But that soon ended when people took back their control of what was seen and heard, and a new term, interactivity, had to be invented for something so fundamental that before it was lost there wasn't even a term for it. People will take back control of their energy just as rapidly as they took back control of communications, as soon as the barriers to doing so are lifted. So the big picture's a mess, but the big picture is actually the sum of all the little pictures. So like others, we're looking at ways of finding a more sensible solution, and we're starting at the other end, in our town. So the task is to turn energy from an individual cost to a collective asset by taking control of it in our own locality. The key is buried in that word locality, which has hidden within it a standard unit of energy, the calorie, or cal for short. So our challenge is to get our hands on that £10 million that's currently leaking out of our town to profit the distant companies that supply us with mostly the wrong sorts of energy. And it really is a mystery why anyone would actually choose to live in a high-cality. WREN is a social enterprise, a cooperative owned by its members, currently numbering 800 or so and rising. We work to reduce people's energy use and costs by helping them insulate their homes, for example. We help people move across to cheaper or low-carbon heating using biomass, for example. We help people and businesses control their energy use by energy monitoring and home energy management. We help people get their own generating equipment, particularly solar PV, and we're promoting electric vehicles for transport and storage. And we're also working on installing major generating capacity from sun and wind that will be locally and cooperatively owned to move the town towards getting all its energy from its local renewable resources. We use about 50,000 megawatt hours per year, and that's what we need to generate. We will then have inflation-proof and cheaper energy. Wadebridge is the pilot site for the Smart Cornwall programme, and we're working on methods of aligning the output of renewable generation to people's consumption through demand-side management and storage. And besides these benefits and savings, WREN's activities will produce about £150,000 per year for local projects or reinvestment. Our members voted that our first community fund offer should go to the food bank. All of this activity is designed to add to the quality of life and the prosperity of the town, including jobs for our children in ways that don't mess up our beautiful bit of the planet. So we are simply going back to a future where we control our own energy again. This was the Wadebridge Energy Supply Company in about 1920, when the benefits stayed local and people knew the owner and engineers. These days the energy will come from wind, sun and tide, but the principle is the same. Market towns have gone through a rather bad time recently. Their markets have gone, and many have been hollowed out by supermarkets. But when people exploit these new technologies for themselves, they can restore the two components of a market town, their warp and weft. The warp is their local embeddedness, with local pride, mutual support, and the benefits of short supply chains to the hinterland for food, energy, and other goods and services. The weft is their global trade, which in the past was mostly the export of primary produce such as wool and grain. Our 15th century bridge is known as the Bridge on Wool. We're about to have the fastest broadband speeds in Europe, so distance is more or less dead in accessing global markets. Our townsfolk can therefore retrieve their global reach and export their ingenuity without, as in the past, resorting to migration. Smart market towns like ours can now prosper as sustainably as the traditional market town, and a high proportion of the UK population lives in areas with this settlement pattern. The current bickering about renewables will be better balanced when more people appreciate the bridge that they offer to a secure future, especially when locally owned. The wren is a small bird, but it's noisy and very territorial. Like many people around the country, we are working to show that it's time to stop faffing about and time to help people take more control of their own energy and their own futures.